In this video, we're going to learn how to amortize different types of financing arrangements, which is practice for your Excel project. So, Stephanie Harris just started a business. She needs a vehicle to visit clients but has no money for a down payment. She's identified a vehicle that costs $40,000 and has received the following 4 financing offers. Her tax rate is 20%. So in part 1, there's an offer for an operating lease at $900 per month. There's really nothing to calculate there except the after-tax effects. There's nothing to amortize because you're not actually purchasing the vehicle. So we're going to amortize parts 2, 3, and 4. So in part 2, we have an offer for a financing lease with Stephanie paying $752.79 a month, beginning immediately. So that's an annuity due for 48 monthly payments with a residual value of $15,000 due at the end of the 4-year term. In part 3, Stephanie can finance the car outright, borrowing $40,000 over 4 years with monthly payments at 9.5%, with payments at the end of the month. Or, in part 4, Stephanie can borrow $40,000 from her credit union for 4 years at 12.5% with interest compounded monthly. Stephanie will make no payments during the 4-year term. All principal and interest is due at the maturity date. So, what's required for each loan? Offers 2, 3, and 4. Prepare an amortization chart showing the calculation of principal and interest paid each month plus the ending balance. And then for each loan, calculate the after-tax cost of interest for each loan and each year and for the 4-year period. So we're going to use a separate worksheet for each loan. First, let's start off with a financing lease. So I'm going to click the worksheet tab for financing lease. And for the financing lease, we have payments of $752.79 per month for 4 years, beginning immediately. I've provided the rate, but I will show you how to calculate the annual rate, and residual value of $15,000 to be paid at the end of the lease term. Now, even though in this problem the rate was provided for you, if the rate was not provided for you, we could actually calculate that rate. So the first thing that we're going to use is the rate function to calculate our rate per period. And as I told you in class, you really can't look at a rate per period. You're going to have to annualize that rate. So I'm going to click in cell M1. I'm going to click the Formulas tab, Financial, and scroll down until I see Rate. So in the N per is going to be 4 years multiplied by 12 payments per year. So we have 48 total payments. Our payment in the problem is given, negative 752.79. I'm putting that in as a negative number because we are paying that. The present value is the cost of the car, and we're receiving that, so that goes in as a positive number, 40,000, with no commas. Very important that you have no commas in your 40,000, because notice how commas separate the arguments in the rate function. And then finally, our future value goes in as negative 15,000, because we are going to be paying that in the future. So notice Excel needs both positive numbers and negative numbers in order to calculate the rate, because it has to calculate the difference between what you're paying and what you're getting back. Then finally, very important, because our payments are beginning immediately, we have to put a number 1 in the type, which changes the rate slightly. I'm going to click OK. And now, as I said, it's very important not to look at that rate per period. So I'm going to take my rate per period and multiply it by 12. And you see, we get pretty much exactly 10%, 9.99999%, which is that 10%. Now, once again, you will not have to do this in your project, but if somebody will not give you an interest rate, This is a very, very easy way to calculate that. So I could put that in percent format before I move on, and you can see that it does calculate as 10%. So in order to do my amortization chart, in column A, I'm going to type period, which is each month. A month is a period. A period can be a month, it can be a quarter, it can be a year, it can be a half year. It depends upon how often the loan is amortized. We're going to need 48 amortization periods because we pay every month, and every month for 4 years. So I'm going to fill in the numbers 1 through 48 down column A. So I'm going to select the cells A9 and A10, and then I'm going to use that fill handle. Notice how my fat plus turns into a skinny plus, not a four-headed arrow, but a skinny plus when I hover over that corner, and I'm just going to drag it down until my tooltip says 48. Now the principles of amortization are always the same. You're going to start off with a beginning balance. Interest is going to make you owe more, and a payment is going to make you owe less. If your payment is at the beginning of the period, you do not owe interest on that payment. If your payment is at the end of the period, you will calculate interest on this payment. So because this is an annuity due, our payments are beginning immediately. For each period, we're going to start off with the beginning balance. Then what's going to happen right after our beginning balance is we're going to make a payment. After we make that payment, we're going to calculate interest. And then, as I told you in class, the ending balance is always the beginning balance, subtract the payment, and add the interest. So now let's get going. In cell B9, the first day that we take out this loan, we're going to owe $40,000. So $40,000 is the beginning balance on this loan. And by the way, if we come down to at the end of 48 periods that we owe $15,000, we're exactly right, because what this lease means is that we're paying interest on $40,000, but we're only paying back $25,000 during the 4-year period, which is why we still owe $15,000 at the end of the period. So now our payment is $752.79, so I'm going to type in 752.79. Now, because the payment is at the beginning of the period, our interest is going to be calculated on the beginning balance minus the payment. So we take this lease out on January 1st, we owe $40,000. We make an immediate $752.79 payment. Now, as I said, under the American rule, first it goes to interest and then the remainder goes to principal. Well, there's no interest yet because it's the first day of the loan, so the entire $752.79 goes to principal. So to calculate the interest, I'm going to tell Excel to take the beginning balance and subtract the payment. Once again, because we make the payment at the beginning of the period, it does not accrue interest. Now we're going to multiply it by our interest rate of 10%. But because this is monthly, we have to divide by 12, because in 1 month we're going to incur 1/12 of an entire year's interest. So I'm going to /12 and then hit enter. We only have 2 more formulas. Once we finish those 2 formulas, we're done, even if this is a 1,000-row amortization chart. So principal times rate times time. I'm going to hit enter. So the first month we're going to owe $327 in interest, and our ending balance, we started off owing $40,000. So we're going to add the $40,000, then we subtract the payment of $752.79, and then the interest is going to make us owe more money, so we're going to add the interest of $327. Now at this point we only have 1 more formula that we need to do, and basically we are done. So I'm going to hit enter, And we have now our ending balance. Now, if we owe $39,500 at the end of the first month, the second month we don't pay interest on $40,000, we pay interest on the $39,500. So the last formula that I need, I'm going to tell Excel that the ending balance of period 1 is the same as the beginning balance for period 2. Once I hit enter, all we have to do is copy these formulas down and our amortization chart will work. And once again, we know it will work if we come down to $15,000 at the end. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to single click cell B10, and because in column A we've told Excel how far to go down, we don't have to drag, we can just double click the fill handle. Now make sure to get the formula in cell B10 on period 2, because if you copy 40,000 down, all you're going to do is calculate simple interest on 40,000 every period. So I want to make sure that I have the second formula. I'm going to double click. Don't worry that it's all zeros, it will work out at the end. Now I found that if I copy these three at the same time, if I copy them down, Excel will change the payment from 752 to 753 to 754. I don't want it to do that, so I'm just going to click on cell C9 and I'm going to double click that fill handle, and if it does actually fill it in as a series, if it goes 752, 753, you can open up this little box down here that says autofill options, and you can tell it to copy the cells instead of filling the series. Now these last two are formulas, so I'm going to select cells D9 and E9, and I'm going to double click that fill handle, and remember I am correct. If I come down to 15,000 at the end, I come down to 15,008 cents because our payment is actually an estimate. It's a rounding. The payment should be 752.787 something or other, or 7923, but it's not exactly 752.79. Now, to answer the last question before we move on to financing and borrowing principal, it wants us to calculate the interest for each year and then the after-tax interest. So I'm going to calculate the yearly interest. All I have to do is, on period 12, add the interest from period 1 to period 12. So I'm going to click in cell F20, which notice it's on the line that corresponds with period 12, and I'm just going to type equals sum, open the parentheses, and just sum all of the interest from period 1 to period 12. Now, because I'm using relative cell references, I can just copy this formula down to periods 24, 36, and 48, and it will just add the last 12 months interest. So I've got my interest for the first 12-month period, 3683.94. I can now just copy this formula, and I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to paste it on the line that corresponds to period 24, which is cell F32, and just click my paste. Notice how the interest is going down because we're paying the principal off each year. Now I'm going to go down to period 36. So that corresponds to cell F44. It may be a different one on yours. Notice how once again the interest every year is going down because we're paying off the principal. And finally 48. We can click paste. And once again, if you're ever unsure of your formula, just double click and it shows you that it's adding the last 12 months. Now the last thing that we have to do is calculate the after tax and then total it up. Pretty simple. In this problem, the tax rate is 20%. Subtracting 20% of a total leaves 80%. So I'll calculate 80% of those four numbers and then just add them up and we're done. So I'm going to calculate my after tax interest. So I'm going to click in cell G20 and I'm going to tell Excel to take F20 and multiply it by 80%. Once again, if we get a tax deduction of 20%, it leaves 80% left over as an expense because we get back 20% of it in taxes. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to click on cell G20. I'm going to copy the formula, and then I'm just going to paste it in G32, G44, and G56. And now all I have to do is make sure to add those 4 years of interest. If you want to get rid of the marquee is the name for those dotted lines, just hit your escape key. But once you hit escape, you can't paste anymore. It removes it from the clipboard. So I'm going to hit escape. And now in cell G57, I'm just going to sum all of the 4 interests. So I'm going to type equals sum, open the parentheses, scroll up, make sure I've got the first one. So I'm going to sum the range G20. It wouldn't hurt to start from G9. You'd get the same answer. But I'm going to sum G20 down to G56. Close up my parentheses, hit enter, and I'm done. Although if you want it to look nice, we can select the entire range here. And on the Home tab, just hit the key that looks like the icon, that looks like a comma for the comma style. And now we have nice even numbers. And we come down just about to 15,000. Here's the after-tax interest that's paid each year. And here's the total interest that is paid over the 4-year period. Okay? Now that we've finished our financing lease, we're going to go over to finance outright. So I'm going to click tab 3, finance, and we're going to get going. On this tab, on the financing tab, we're going to first calculate the payment and then amortize a loan for financing outright. Now the difference between financing outright and a financing lease is that when you make the last payment on a financing lease, you still owe that residual value. In our example, it was $15,000. When you finance outright, you make the last payment and you're done. You own the vehicle. There are no other payments to make. So for the financing lease, as I said, with the financing lease, what we were doing was we were borrowing $25,000, but actually paying interest on $40,000. With financing outright, we're borrowing $40,000, but we're paying back the $40,000. We're not paying back just $25,000 out of it. So when we finance outright, the first thing that we're going to need to do is calculate the payment. We can very easily calculate the payment using the PMT function. So I'm going to type the word payment. I'm going to click in cell B8, and I'm going to click Formulas, Financial, and then scroll down to PMT. Now be careful, PPMT is different. That calculates the principal payment, but we're not going to need that function because we can very easily calculate the principal payment. So I'm going to click on PMT, calculates the payment for a loan, and we have to put in our interest rate. Our interest rate is given at 9.5%, but because it's a monthly loan, we have to /12. In our NPER, it's 4 years multiplied by 12 payments per year. So you can see that Excel is calculating 48 for us. And our present value is 40,000. Now, if we put in the present value as a positive 40,000, we're going to get a negative payment because if we borrow $40,000 today, we're going to have to make payments. So if I want the number to come out as a positive number, for the present value, I'm going to put in negative 40,000. Now, I stated here that this is an ordinary annuity. So for an ordinary annuity, I can just leave the type blank. Now I'm leaving the FV blank over here because once again, after we make the last payment, there's no more money to pay. in part 2, the financing lease, we had to pay another $15,000, so the $15,000 was our future value. In this case, at the end of 48 periods, we want no more obligation, we have no more payments, so there's no future value. So again, if this was an annuity due with the monthly payments for 4 years at the beginning, I would just put the number 1 in the type, but in this case it's an ordinary annuity, so you can either put the number 0 or just leave it blank. So I'm just going to leave it blank. I'm going to click OK, and we see we have a payment of just about $1,000 and $1,005 a month. So I'm going to click OK, and there's our payment. And now we're going to amortize the loan exactly the same way that we did before, with 2 minor changes. First, since our payment is at the end of the period, we're going to switch these two, because first we have the interest during the month, then we make the payment at the end of the month. So for our ordinary annuity with our outright financing, we're going to have the interest column first and then the payment. The second minor difference is, to know that we're right, we need to come down to 0. So I'm going to start off the same way that I did before. I'm going to put in the period from 1 to 48. So I'm going to type just 1 and 2. If you feel like typing all the way down to 48, that's okay. But I'm going to select the 1 and 2, and then drag that fill handle, remember skinny plus, over that little box in the bottom right hand corner, and drag it down until the tooltip says 48. I can't double click because Excel does not know how far to go down, because we were in column A, there was nothing to the left. Once we start in column B, we can double click because Excel knows how far to go down. So in column B, we're going to start off once again with our beginning balance. Now, because this is an ordinary annuity, the payment isn't until the end of the first month, so we're going to accrue interest all during the month. So for an ordinary annuity, interest comes first, then we have our payment, and then just the same way that we had before, our ending balance is going to be the sum of the beginning balance, the interest is going to make us owe more, and the payment is going to make us owe less. So in this case, in cell B11, once again, we're going to start off with a $40,000 beginning balance because we're purchasing a $40,000 vehicle. Now, because we're not making the payment until the end of the first month, all during the first month, we're going to accrue interest on the entire $40,000 beginning balance. So I'm going to tell Excel to take the beginning balance. We're going to multiply it by 9.5%, and then we're going to /12. Principal times rate times time. Beginning balance multiplied by interest rate multiplied by 1/12 or divided by 12. So we hit enter, and we have our interest for the first month as $316.67. Now we're going to make our payment. I could type in 1004.93, but once again, we won't come down exactly to 0. We might come down to 21 cents or -6 cents because of rounding. So what I'm going to do here for the payment is I'm going to type an equal sign. I'm going to click on cell B8, the payment, but what I have to do is I have to use the dollar signs. So I'm going to hit my F4 key if I'm using a PC, Command T if I'm using a Mac, or I can type the dollar signs. Without the dollar signs, it will not work, because on this row you'll have a payment of 0. On this row you'll have a payment of BEGBAL, because it will drag this down as we drag this down. So the $B $8 says, no, even if you copy this, I always still want you to point to the payment. So I'm going to hit enter, and just like before, our ending balance is the sum of our beginning balance. Interest makes us owe more, so I'm going to add the interest, and now I'm going to subtract the payment. As I said, one more formula and we're done with this amortization chart. even if it was 1,000 periods, we're completely done, all the formulas that we need. So if we end up the first month owing $39,311, we don't pay interest on $40,000 the second month, we pay interest on the $39,000. So now in cell B12 for period 2, I'm going to tell Excel that whatever is the ending balance the previous month, use that as the beginning balance for the next month. So all I do is type an equal sign and click on cell E11, and as I copy it down, it'll go to E12, E13, and E14. Now I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to click on cell B12. If I start here and I use the fill handle, nothing's going to happen because there's nothing in this cell. So I have to click back on cell B12, double click the fill handle. Don't worry that it's 0. We'll fix that in just a moment as we copy the other formulas down. And now, because all of these are formulas instead of numbers, I can select all 3 of these at the same time and copy them in one fell swoop. So I'm going to select the range C11, D11, and E11, and then double click the fill handle. And once again, we know that we're correct if we come down to 0. So it looks like that we are correct. Now all I need to do is exactly the same thing that I did before to calculate the interest for each year. So in column F, I'm going to calculate the yearly interest. Just add each 12-month period. And then in column G, I'll do the same thing. Because our tax rate is 20%, I will calculate 80% of the yearly interest number. So I'm going to click on the row that represents period 12, the end of the first year. So I'm going to click on cell F22, and I'm just going to type equal sum and add up the first 12 months interest, column C. So period 1 all the way up to period 12, add up all of that interest, close up the formula, and now I can do the same thing. I can click back on the formula, go to my Home tab, copy it, and then paste it on row 24, the end of the second year, row 36, or period 36, it's actually row 46, the end of the third year, and then period 48, the end of the fourth year. Notice how little interest we're paying the fourth year because we're paying off a lot more principal. Now all I need to do is calculate the after-tax. In this problem, our tax rate is 20%, so I'm just going to take 80% of the yearly interest. So I'm going to tell Excel to take the yearly interest, multiply that by 80%, copy that formula, paste it to G34, G46, and G48, and then just total column G. So I'm going to click in cell G59, equal sum, open the parentheses, and just add the 4 after-tax interest amounts. And it wouldn't hurt if you added it from G11 all the way down. Just don't include the sum. So don't include row 59, just sum down to row 58. Close it up, hit enter, and now we're done. Now we can see that financing it outright, buying it, we pay a total of $6,589 in interest. If we do a lease, our total after-tax interest is even more, so we're paying more interest, and we still have to pay $15,000 at the end. So notice if we pay off the entire principal during the time, we have a higher payment. With the financing lease, we only have to pay $753 a month. When we finance it outright, we have to pay over $1,000 a month, but look how much less interest we're going to pay. $6,500, almost $6,600 versus almost $9,000. Now let's go on to our last piece, which is borrowing the principal. So in this case, we're going to borrow $40,000 and we're just going to pay it back at the end of the 4-year period. So there's going to be no principal. Now in this case, what's going to happen is not only are we going to pay interest on the $40,000, because we're not paying off the interest, we're going to start paying the interest on the interest. So this is basically going to amortize the same exact way. Our payment is just going to be zero. So each period we're going to add the interest and subtract our payment of zero. So each period we're going to add the interest. If we take the beginning balance, add the interest, and subtract the payment of zero, each period we add the interest, and then that balance, including the interest, becomes our principal for the next period. So let's get going with our amortization chart. This one is actually going to be the easiest because all we have to do is calculate the interest and just accumulate it over the period of time. So I'm going to go 48 months. I will call this a period because that's normally what I do. If you wanted to call it month, that's fine. 1, 2. Select the 1 and 2, which is different than the fill handle, and then use that fill handle to fill the numbers. Well, I went way too far. Down to 48. Now, as I said, I'm going to amortize this exactly the same way. Beginning balance, interest. To be consistent, I'll put in the payment column, but it's all going to be zero, so we're just going to be subtracting zero, so you can actually leave out the interest column, the payment column total, and just come to the end, but I just want to show how it all works the same way. So we have a payment, and then we have our ending balance. So with our beginning balance, period 1, we're borrowing $40,000. So the first month, we're going to take the interest, calculate the interest, so equal sign in cell C9, take the beginning balance, multiply it by the interest rate of 12.5%, and then because this is a month, we have to /12, because the beginning balance multiplied by 12.5% is how much interest you'd owe for an entire year. We're not calculating it for a year, we're calculating it for a month, and we can't use that formula to calculate for a year because it's compounded. So what we'd have to do if we wanted to calculate it for a year is we'd have to take the beginning balance, multiply it by 1 plus the periodic interest rate, 12.5%, to the power of 12. Mathematically, that's kind of what we're doing with the amortization chart. So for those of you who are good at math, you can work that through. So I'm going to hit enter. Now, as I said, our payment remains at zero, so we could even delete column D if we wanted. So for our ending balance, we take the beginning balance, we add the interest, and notice that we're subtracting a payment of zero, so all we're going to do is take the beginning balance and increase it by interest each period. So now, because we didn't make a payment, now the second month we're going to not owe interest on $40,000, we're going to owe interest on $40,416. So the same way that we had our other amortization charts, I'm going to click in cell B10 and I'm going to tell Excel that the ending balance, so I'm going to do equals and click on cell E9, and that tells Excel that the ending balance for 1 month is the same as the beginning balance for all of the other months. So I hit enter. Make sure to copy the second formula in the beginning balance. That's why in class I use that period 0. If you use the period 0, you could actually copy all the formulas on row 1. It's just a style issue. I'm doing it this way for this video. So I'm going to double click the fill handle for cell B10, the second formula in the beginning balance. And now I can use my fill handle and copy that all the way down. Now, this is what I told you happened before. Notice it's filling the series for the payment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all the payments. I'm just going to hit the delete key. And we could keep it just blank, that's fine, but I'm just going to type the number 0. I'm going to click in cell D9, double click the fill handle. Now it gives me all zeros. Now if you borrowed $40,000 and just incurred interest the entire time and made no payment, you would have to pay back almost $66,000 at the end of the 4 years, and the only thing that increased you from the $40,000 to the $65,000 is interest. So in this case, you're going to pay $25,000 in interest. So to finish this up, this video is already pretty long. I'm going to calculate the same way that I did before, the yearly interest, and then the after-tax amount. So the same way that I did before, I'm just going to go to each period 12 and add up the interest for the previous 12 months, So I'm going to click on cell F20, equals sum, and just add the interest from period 1. So cell C9 down to period 12, C20. Now, as I said, because we've just told Excel to add the previous 12 months, we can hit enter. I can click back on cell F20, copy that formula, and paste it for month 24, which is cell F32. Just click paste. Click on period 36, I lost my place for a second, row 44. So click in cell F44 representing period 36 and click paste. And then period 48, I'm going to click in cell F56 and click paste. Notice in this case our interest is going up because not only are we not paying back the principal, we're also not paying back any of the interest, so we're being charged interest on the interest. So in our previous two cases, our interest went down over time. In this case, our interest is going up over time. So all we have to do is take 80% of the yearly interest, add it up, and we're completely done with the project. So equals, so I'm going to click in cell G20, type in equal sign, and tell Excel to take the interest for the first year and multiply it by 80%, which is the after-tax amount of my 20% tax rate. So it would take 1 minus the 20%. So in your problem, you would take 1 minus your tax rate. In your project, you would take 1 minus your tax rate. So hit enter, and the same way, I can copy that formula and paste it to G32, G36, I'm sorry, G44, no, that's period 36, G44, and G56, representing month 48. And now I can add all of those together, equals sum. And once again, I have a choice from going from the first after-tax amount or from cell G9. Make sure that you do include that first. Make sure that you're adding all four together. Don't include the sum, otherwise you're going to get a circular reference. So I'm going to add G20 to G56, close it up, and now we're going to pay after tax $20,600 in interest. So to close this up, to make a comparison, if we borrow the same $40,000 with a financing lease, we would wind up paying almost $9,000 in interest over the 4-year period. Financing it outright, about $6,600, and borrowing the principal and just paying it back at the end of the period, $20,600 in interest. That is pretty much all that is required for your project. So for each loan, prepare an amortization chart and calculate the after-tax cost of interest.